The village of Zuwena lay nestled between rolling hills and vast golden fields, where the scent of earth and wood smoke filled the air. But for Zuwena, the world had become a place of ashes and sorrow. At only 12 years old, she had lost everything: her parents, her younger brother, and the warmth of a home. The fire had taken it all in a single night. The flames had danced wildly against the night sky, swallowing their small hot hole. Neighbors rushed to douse the inferno, but it was too late. In the morning, the smoldering ruins stood as a grim reminder of her loss. The villagers murmured in hushed tones. Some claimed it was an accident, a cruel twist of fate. Others whispered of darker things, of jealousy, of silent hands striking in the night, but no one dared to speak openly. In the end, the truth remained buried beneath their fear. Zuwena had no one left except for Aunt Masika, her late father's older sister. When Masika arrived at the ruins, her face was unreadable, her voice laced with something that made Zuwena's skin crawl. "Come," she said simply, and Zuwena had no choice but to follow. Masika's home stood on the other side of the village, larger than Zuwena's old hut but cold and unwelcoming. As they entered, Masika's two children, Kamal and Naya, watched her with eyes full of curiosity and something else. Something cruel. "You will sleep there," Masika said, pointing to the hard, dusty floor near the kitchen. "No bed, no mat. And don't expect to eat for free. If you want food, you will work for it." Zuwena swallowed hard, her small fist tightening. She had nowhere else to go. So, without a word, she curled up on the cold ground, her heart aching for the family she had lost. The days that followed were filled with hunger and toil. Before the sun even rose, Masika would shake her awake, forcing her to fetch water from the distant well, sweep the yard, wash the clothes, and prepare meals for the family. While her cousins played and ate heartily, she scrubbed floors and endured their laughter. "Why is she even here?" Kamal sneered one day, tossing a piece of bread just out of her reach. "She's nothing but a beggar. Maybe we should send her to the forest," Naya giggled. "Let the spirits take her." Zuwena ignored them, swallowing her pride along with the hunger in her belly. She had no choice but to endure. But it was the night that brought the worst of it. The loneliness, the cold, the overwhelming grief. And on one such night, as she lay staring at the thatched roof above her, voices drifted from the other room. "She's of no use to me," Masika's voice hissed. A deep, unfamiliar voice responded. "You know what to do. The price is fair." Zuwena's breath caught. She shifted closer, pressing her ear to the wooden wall. "She's young. Strong. Someone will pay well for her." A sick feeling twisted in Zuwena's stomach. They were talking about her. "I'll bring her to you tomorrow night," Masika said, her tone final. Zuwena scrambled back to her cold corner, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Fear gripped her, squeezing her lungs tight. She had lost everything, but she refused to lose herself. Tomorrow night, she would be gone before they could take her. Soared into darkness. The morning was silent, save for the rustling of dry leaves beneath Zuwena's bare feet. She was shoved into the back of a wooden cart, her small wrist bound with rough rope. Her Aunt Masika barely looked at her, only hissing a warning. "Don't try anything foolish, girl. This man is your new master now." Zuwena's heart pounded as the cart jolted forward. She turned to see her village fading behind her, the only home she had ever known disappearing into the dusty horizon. She wanted to scream, to fight, but fear clenched her throat. The man beside Masika was wealthy, his robes clean and embroidered, his fingers adorned with rings that glinted in the sun. His dark eyes scanned her like one inspects cattle at the market. He had smiled when he first saw her. A smile that sent chills down her spine. The journey was long, the path winding through endless fields and forest. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but when she asked for food, the man's servant shoved a piece of stale bread at her without a word. She chewed slowly, her mind racing. Where was he taking her? After what felt like hours, the cart rolled to a stop in front of a large house, much grander than any she had ever seen. Its tall walls were made of stone, the windows lined with iron bars. Something about it felt like a prison. The man led her inside, his voice gentle, almost fatherly. You will have food, shelter, clothes, he said, watching her carefully. All you have to do is obey. Zuwena nodded stiffly. She had no choice. That night, she was given a clean dress, a warm meal, and a bed to sleep in, luxuries she had not known in a long time. But beneath the kindness, she sensed something sinister. The way the man's gaze lingered too long. The way his fingers brushed against her shoulder as he guided her to her room. Sleep did not come easily. Her stomach twisted with unease. And then, the door creaked open. She bolted upright, her breath catching in her throat. The old man stood in the doorway, his silhouette cast long and menacing in the moonlight. His voice was soft. Too soft. Are you comfortable, little one? Zuwena's heart pounded. She didn't answer. He stepped closer. That was when she knew she had to escape. The plan. The next day, she observed everything. The guards at the front gate. The high stone walls. The thick locks on every door. She was trapped. But she was not alone. Among the servants, there was one who seemed different. A young woman named Amina, whose kind eyes carried a sadness Zuwena recognized. That evening, when the others were busy, Amina slipped a small bundle of food into her hands. You must leave this place, she whispered urgently. Tonight. Zuwena hesitated. How? The gates. I will help you. Amina glanced around before pressing a small knife into her palm. But you must be strong. Zuwena gripped the knife, nodding. She would do whatever it took. The escape. The house was quiet, the air thick with the scent of burning oil lamps. Zuwena tiptoed through the halls, her hands trembling. At the back of the house, Amina had left the kitchen door slightly ajar. Freedom was only a few steps away. Then, a noise behind her. She turned sharply. The old man stood at the top of the stairs, watching her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, guards, he bellowed. Zuwena bolted. The kitchen door swung open just as footsteps thundered behind her. She ran. Into the night. Into the darkness. Her bare feet pounded against the cold earth as shouts echoed behind her. She didn't stop. Branches clawed at her skin. Thorny bushes tore at her dress. But she kept running, deeper and deeper into the forest, until the shouts faded into the distance. Alone in the wild. The forest swallowed her whole. Zuwena collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The darkness was suffocating. The night creatures stirred, owls hooted, unseen animals rustled through the underbrush. She was alone. And she was starving. The food Amina had given her was gone, eaten in desperate bites hours ago. Now, her stomach ached with hunger. Cold. Tired. She curled up beneath the roots of an old tree, hugging her knees. Tears slipped down her face. Would she die here? Then, a voice. Soft, low, almost like the wind whispering through the trees. Zuwena lifted her head. A shadow moved among the trees. Not an animal. Not a monster. An old woman. Her face was lined with age, her eyes dark and knowing. She wore a robe made of thick, woven fabric, and a walking stick rested in her gnarled hands. She studied Zuwena for a long moment before speaking. You are far from home, child. Zuwena swallowed. She didn't know whether to run or stay. But something about the woman felt safe. Tears welled in her eyes. I have nowhere to go. The woman extended a wrinkled hand. Come, she said softly. Let's fix that. Zuwena hesitated, then, with trembling fingers, she reached out and stepped into the unknown, the woman of the forest. The forest loomed like a living creature, its dense canopy swallowing the moonlight, casting everything in eerie darkness. Zuwena's heartbeat slowed as she followed the old woman through the tangled underbrush. The woman's footsteps were steady, unhurried, as if she had walked this path for 100 years. Zuwena hesitated, glancing back toward the direction she had come. Somewhere beyond the trees, men were searching for her. If they found her, there would be no second escape. Come, child, the woman called softly, not bothering to turn around. Zuwena clenched her fist and followed. Nana Kaya. The hut stood deep within the forest, barely visible beneath the twisting vines and thick moss that grew over its wooden frame. Smoke curled from a small hole in the roof, filling the air with the scent of burning herbs. Inside, the space was cramped but filled with warmth. Jars of dried plants lined the shelves, wooden carvings rested on the floor, and animal hides covered the walls. The woman set down her walking stick and turned to Zuwena. I am Nana Kaya, she said. Her voice was rough, like wine through dried leaves. And you, child, are not meant to be here. Zuwena lowered her gaze. I had nowhere else to go. Nana Kaya studied her, her sharp eyes filled with something Zuwena couldn't name. No one comes to this forest without reason, she murmured. The villagers fear me, but they also know I see things. Zuwena frowned. See what? The old woman turned toward a clay pot boiling over the fire. The past. The future. The truth. Zuwena swallowed. Rest, Nana Kaya said, pointing to a pile of straw and blankets in the corner. Tomorrow, we talk. Secrets of the past. Days passed, and the fear in Zuwena's heart slowly faded. Nana Kaya was not like Masika. She didn't shout or strike her. She taught her how to catch fish with her hands, how to build traps, how to tell which plants could heal and which could kill. And at night, as they sat by the fire, Nana Kaya whispered secrets. Your family's death, she said one evening, was not an accident. Zuwena's breath caught. The village chief and your aunt Masika planned it together. Zuwena felt her body go cold. That's not true. Nana Kaya sighed. A greedy man will kill for land. A jealous woman will kill for wealth. The words burned like hot iron in Zuwena's chest. They set the fire themselves, Nana Kaya continued. Then they let the villagers believe it was a curse, or an accident. Zuwena's hands trembled. She had spent weeks blaming herself for surviving. But now, knowing the truth, Masika had sold her. But before that, she had taken everything. Her parents. Her brother. Her life. Zuwena's fingers curled into fists. I won't let them get away with it. Nana Kaya watched her carefully. Justice is not easy, child. And revenge, it is dangerous. I don't care, Zuwena said through gritted teeth. They must pay for what they did. The old woman was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached into a small leather pouch at her waist and pulled out something small and golden. A ring. It was simple, yet something about it felt strange. Nana Kaya held it out. This belonged to a great warrior long ago. It holds a secret even I do not fully understand. Zuwena hesitated before taking it. The metal was warm against her skin, pulsing like a heartbeat. What kind of secret? She asked. Nana Kaya shook her head. You must find that out for yourself. Zuwena slipped the ring onto her finger. A sharp, tingling sensation shot up her arm. And then, the fire in the hut flickered violently. The wind outside howled, shaking the walls. The ground beneath her trembled. Zuwena gasped. Nana Kaya's expression darkened. It has awakened. The power of the ring. That night, strange things began to happen. Zuwena's dreams were vivid, shadows twisting, voices whispering in a language she didn't understand. Images of the village chief and Masika flashed before her eyes, their faces twisted in shock, in fear. She woke, drenched in sweat. The ring glowed faintly in the darkness. She turned it around her finger, watching as the golden surface shifted, revealing tiny symbols carved into the metal. They hadn't been there before. Her heart pounded. What was this thing? The next morning, as she fetched water from a nearby stream, she saw something impossible. A bird lay on the ground, struggling. Its wing was broken. Zuwena hesitated, then reached out, her fingers brushing against its feathers. The moment she did, a soft warmth spread through her hand, flowing into the bird. And then, the wing healed before her eyes. Zuwena gasped, stumbling backward. The bird chirped once, then flew away as if nothing had happened. Her hand shook as she stared at the ring. What had Nana Kaya given her? The decision. That evening, she told Nana Kaya what had happened. The old woman nodded solemnly. The ring does not give power, it reveals what is already within you. Zuwena frowned. I don't understand. You have a choice, child, Nana Kaya said. Stay here, where you are safe. Or return to the village and seek the justice you crave. Zuwena hesitated. Part of her wanted to hide. To stay in the forest where no one could hurt her. But another part, one that burned deep inside, refused. She could not let Masika and the village chief win. She could not let her family's deaths be forgotten. She looked down at the ring. Then, at Nana Kaya. I'm going back. The old woman sighed, then placed a hand on Zuwena's shoulder. Then may the spirits guide you, she murmured. Zuwena swallowed. Tomorrow, she would return. And the truth would be known. Betrayal and power. The village looked the same as when she had fled, dusty paths winding between mud huts, the smell of burning firewood lingering in the air. But to Zuwena, everything felt different. She was no longer the scared, powerless girl Masika had cast aside. She had returned to reclaim her life. With the golden ring hidden beneath her sleeve, she stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The darkness within the village. The first thing she noticed was how the villagers avoided her gaze. Some whispered behind their hands, while others quickly turned away. They knew. Maybe they didn't know the full truth, but they knew something was wrong. Zuwena clenched her fists. She had to make them listen. She moved through the marketplace, heading straight for Masika's home. But before she could reach the entrance, a familiar voice stopped her. Zuwena. She turned sharply. It was Lima, a girl she had once called her friend. Lima's eyes were wide with shock. We thought you were dead. Zuwena hesitated. I escaped. Lima stepped closer, lowering her voice. You shouldn't have come back. Masika, she's dangerous. More dangerous than you know. Zuwena studied her, suddenly realizing how thin and tired Lima looked. What do you mean? Lima swallowed hard. It's not just you, Zuwena. Masika has been selling other girls, to powerful men. Men from outside the village. Zuwena's stomach turned. She tells their families that they are being sent to work in the city, but they never return. Lima's voice cracked. My sister was one of them. A deep rage ignited in Zuwena's chest. Masika wasn't just a murderer, she was a monster. She must be stopped, Zuwena whispered. Lima shook her head. You don't understand. The chief protects her. Everyone is afraid. Zuwena's grip tightened around the ring. Not for long. Summoning the power of the ring. Night fell over the village. Zuwena stood in the shadows near the chief's house, waiting. She had to act before Masika could sell another girl. Closing her eyes, she touched the ring. For days, she had felt its power growing, shifting beneath her skin. It was time to use it. She focused on the images in her mind, the fire that had taken her family, Masika's cruel laughter, the chief's greedy eyes. The ring burned hot against her skin. A gust of wind rushed through the village, rattling doors and shaking rooftops. People stepped outside, whispering in confusion. Then, one by one, the torches lining the chief's courtyard flickered and exploded into blue flames. A hushed silence fell. And then Zuwena stepped forward. The villagers gasped as they recognized her. She's back, someone murmured. She survived. Masika stormed out of the house, her face twisted in rage. You, she spat. You dare return. Zuwena lifted her hand, revealing the glowing ring. Masika's expression changed in an instant. Her fury turned to terror. No, that ring. It cannot be. The chief stepped out beside her, his dark eyes narrowing. What is the meaning of this? Zuwena took a deep breath and raised her voice. This woman and your so-called leader murdered my family. And they've been selling our daughters for their own greed. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Villagers exchanged uneasy glances. But no one stepped forward. Fear still held them captive. Zuwena's heart pounded. How much longer will you let them rule with fear? How many more must suffer before you fight back? Masika regained her composure, forcing a smirk. Who will believe the word of a runaway orphan? I will, Lima's voice rang out. Zuwena turned in shock. Lima stepped forward, trembling but defiant. They took my sister, she said. And I know she was not the only one. Another voice joined. My niece was sent away last year, we never heard from her again. Then another. And another. The villagers were waking up. Masika's smirk disappeared. The chief stepped forward, his voice cold. Enough. I will not have a child stirring rebellion in my village. Zuwena felt the power of the ring pulsing. She clenched her fist. The chief's body stiffened. His face paled. What are you doing? He choked. Zuwena wasn't sure, she only knew that she had reached into something ancient, something powerful. The villagers watched in shock as the chief staggered back, as though an invisible force held him. Masika screamed. She is cursed. She wields the power of the guardian spirit of justice. Some villagers fell to their knees, whispering prayers. Zuwena took a step forward, her voice steady. You will pay for what you have done. Masika turned to run. But the villagers moved now, blocking her escape. For the first time, Masika had nowhere to hide. A knife in the dark. Just as victory seemed within reach, Zuwena felt a shift in the air. A shadow moved behind her. Pain. A sharp, burning pain in her side. She gasped, stumbling forward. The word spun. Lima caught her before she fell. Zuwena looked down. Blood spread across her dress. She turned, searching for her attacker. And her heart broke. It was Kato. Her cousin. The one person she had thought might still care. He stood frozen, his eyes filled with regret, the knife shaking in his hand. I had to, he whispered. Masika said she would kill me if I didn't. Zuwena's vision blurred. Betrayed. She had come so far. I'd risk everything. And now, darkness closed in around her. The last thing she heard was Masika's voice, filled with triumph. Take her away. And then, nothing. The price of truth. Pain. That was the first thing Zuwena felt when she regained consciousness. A deep, throbbing ache in her side where Kato's knife had pierced her. The second thing she felt was cold. She was lying on a damp dirt floor, the scent of mold and decay thick in the air. Chains rattled in the darkness. She wasn't alone. Whispers surrounded her, soft, fearful voices of other girls trapped in the same nightmare. Masika had won. For now. A fate worse than death. Zuwena forced herself upright, wincing at the pain. Moonlight streamed through the wooden slats of the crude prison cell. On the other side of the bars, Masika and the chief stood in hushed conversation. She's dangerous, Masika hissed. We should have killed her. The chief shook his head. Not yet. There are men coming at sunrise. They'll pay well for a girl with her fire. Zuwena's blood ran cold. She wasn't just being locked away, she was going to be sold. Masika turned, her eyes gleaming with malice. Enjoy your last night in the village, girl. You won't be coming back. Zuwena clenched her fist, but the wound in her side made her too weak to fight. For the first time since she had returned, she felt the stirrings of hopelessness. What could she do? How could she stop them when she couldn't even stand without pain? Her fingers brushed against the ring. It was still there. But what good was it now? A whisper from the past. Sleep crept upon her like a shadow, and in the darkness of her mind, a voice called out. Zuwena, my child. Her eyes fluttered open in the dream world, and she found herself in the midst of a vast, endless plain. A golden glow flickered before her. Her mother. The sight of her nearly broke Zuwena. She wanted to run into her arms, to weep, to beg her to take her away from this suffering. But her mother's expression was not soft. It was fierce. Determined. You are stronger than you know, she said. The ring, do you understand what it is? Zuwena shook her head. It is not just a relic. It is a key. Her mother stepped closer, placing her hand over Zuwena's heart. It holds the power of the forgotten. The spirits of those who were silenced. The ones who never found justice. Zuwena's breath hitched. The spirits are waiting, her mother whispered. But they need you to call them. The dream began to fade, but her mother's final words rang in her ears. Justice requires sacrifice. Awakening the spirits. Zuwena jolted awake, the dream still burning in her mind. The cell was the same. The chains, the darkness, the quiet sobs of the other girls. But something was different. The ring. It was glowing. Faintly at first, then brighter, like embers catching flame. Zuwena's pulse quickened. She pressed her hand against the cold earth and whispered, I call upon the forgotten. Those who have suffered. Those who were betrayed. A gust of wind howled through the cracks of the wooden cell. The other girls gasped. The air grew thick with energy, and suddenly, whispers filled the room. Not from the girls. From the shadows. Shapes began to form, figures of women, children, even men, their translucent forms flickering like candlelight. The forgotten. The ones Masika had sold. The ones the chief had murdered. They had returned. Breaking free. Zuwena's strength surged. She rose to her feet, the wound in her side no longer holding her back. The spirits swirled around her, their whispers growing louder. The lock on the cell door rusted before their eyes, crumbling into dust. The girls hesitated, too afraid to move. Zuwena turned to them, her eyes burning with conviction. We fight back. No one else will. One by one, the girls stood. They were scared. But they were ready. Zuwena led them out into the night. The uprising. The village was asleep, unaware of the storm about to break. Zuwena moved like a shadow, the spirits guiding her path. The chief's guards stood at the entrance of the holding quarters where other captured girls were kept. They didn't see her coming. With a single flick of her wrist, the ring paused, and the spirits descended upon the guards. Their screams shattered the silence. The villagers awoke to chaos, blue fire erupting in the streets, shadows moving like living ghosts. Masika ran from her house, horror twisting her face. "This cannot be," she shrieked. The chief stumbled beside her, his bravado gone. "It's the spirits. They've returned for vengeance." The villagers poured out of their homes, watching in shock. Some fell to their knees, murmuring prayers. Others simply stared, unable to believe their eyes. Zuwena stepped forward, the spirits swirling around her. She pointed at Masika. "You betrayed your own people. You sold our daughters. You stole lives that were never yours to take." Masika's face twisted with fury. "I did what I had to. Power is for those who take it." The spirits surged forward. Masika screamed as their cold hands grasped at her, pulling her to her knees. The chief tried to run, but the villagers blocked his escape. The truth had finally come out. But it was not enough. Zuwena could see it in their faces. They were still afraid. Still uncertain. Fear had ruled them for too long. Justice required more. Justice required sacrifice. A heavy price. The spirits whispered to Zuwena. The ring's power was at its peak. She could end it now. She could take Masika's life. Take the chief's. It would be so easy. But, would that truly be justice? She clenched her fist. "No," she whispered. "Their punishment will not be by my hands." She turned to the villagers. "You have always been afraid," she said. "But fear is what let them win. If you want justice, you must take it for yourselves." Silence. Then, one voice rose. "She is right. Lima." She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "No more fear." Another voice joined. Then another. And another. The villagers surrounded Masika and the chief, their anger finally outweighing their fear. Masika screamed. The chief begged. But justice had come. Zuwena turned away as the crowd took them. She did not need to watch. Their fate was already sealed. The spirits faded, their task complete. And as the sun began to rise over the village, Zuwena knew. Her fight was not over. It had only just begun. The rise of the forgotten. The air was thick with the cries of the guilty. Masika and the chief, once untouchable, now lay bound before the village, their faces contorted with terror. The spirits of the forgotten had risen, their presence undeniable, shaking the very ground beneath them. A great wind howled through the trees, carrying the whispers of the ancestors, voices of those who had been stolen, betrayed, and silenced. The villagers trembled, watching as the spirits surrounded the condemned. Some clutched their chests, whispering prayers. Others wept, their guilt heavy on their souls. But no one stepped forward to help Masika or the chief. Not this time. Their power had been built on silence, but now silence had abandoned them. Justice had come. The judgment of the ancestors. The spirits moved as one, their translucent hands stretching toward Masika and the chief. No. Masika shrieked, her voice raw with fear. I did what I had to. I deserved that land. That wealth. The chief's face was pale, his arrogance shattered. He had ruled with fear for so long, but now he was the one who cowered. The spirits did not waver. Zuwena watched, her heart pounding. She could feel their judgment. It was not rage. It was not vengeance. It was balance. One by one, the spirits pressed their hands upon Masika and the chief, their ghostly fingers seeping into their skin. The village gasped as Masika's screams became muffled, as if the air had been stolen from her lungs. The chief clutched his throat, his eyes wide with horror. Then, in the blink of an eye, they collapsed. Their bodies remained, but their eyes empty, soulless. Their spirits had been taken, bound to the realm of the forgotten. The villagers fell to their knees, some sobbing, others bowing their heads in reverence. The ancestors had spoken. A new dawn. The spirits turned towards Zuwena. For a moment, she feared they would take her, too, that the power she had wielded came at a cost she had yet to pay. But instead, they bowed. A great hush fell over the village. A deep voice echoed through the air, neither male nor female, but something ancient. You have done what we could not. You have restored balance. Zuwena felt tears stain her eyes. What happens now? A woman stepped forward from the spirits. Her mother. Zuwena gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Her mother's face was filled with sorrow and pride. Now, my child, you must leave. Zuwena reached out, but before her fingers could touch, the spirits faded into the wind, carried away like dust in the morning light. And just like that, they were gone, reclaiming her family's legacy. The village stood in stunned silence. Then, slowly, they turned to Zuwena. She was no longer an orphan. No longer a girl cast aside. She was something more. She was the guardian of the forgotten. One of the elders stepped forward, bowing deeply. The land your parents died for, it is yours now. The words felt hollow. Once, Zuwena had dreamed of reclaiming what had been stolen from her. She had imagined revenge, wealth, power. But now, standing before a village forever changed, she realized she wanted none of it. She looked at the frightened, lost children huddled in the crowd, orphans like her, stolen girls who had no homes to return to. She looked at the villagers, their eyes filled with shame but also with hope. She knew what she had to do. This land, she said, her voice steady, will not be a place of wealth or power. It will be a home for the forgotten. A place where no child will ever be sold or abandoned again. The mama rippled through the crowd, but no one objected. Because they knew it was right. And so, where her family's home once stood, Zuwena built something new. A sanctuary. A refuge for the lost. A place where suffering would not be ignored. A daughter's promise. The sun was setting when Zuwena found herself standing before three graves. Her parents. Her younger brother. The land was hers now, but they were not here to see it. She knelt, pressing her hands to the earth. I did not forget you, she whispered. They tried to bury me, but I have risen. And I will never let them bury another child again. A soft wind blew, rustling the trees. It felt like an answer. Like a promise kept. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she did not weep from sorrow. She had survived. And survival was only the beginning. The fight that never ends. The village would never be the same. The old power was gone, but the wounds it left behind would take time to heal. Zuwena knew this. She knew that there would always be those who tried to take advantage of the weak. She knew that silence could return if fear was allowed to grow again. But she would be there to remind them. She would be the voice of the forgotten. She would fight, not just for herself, but for every child who had been stolen, every girl who had been sold, every soul who had been cast aside. Because true freedom, true justice, was not something given. It was something fought for. And Zuwena was ready to fight. Forever.